Hi, Kevin Greene here. Welcome to Pathways to the Past. I'm starting this video at my shop in the middle of downtown Seymour, and I thought I would do a little something different for this video. Most of the videos that I do, well, all the videos I've done so far have been on one particular subject or one particular location. But with this video, I thought I'd do something different, and I think it's going to be fun. It's a sunny Sunday afternoon. The temperature's about 50 degrees. Seems like it's a good day for a walk around the downtown area. And I'm going to call this video The Ghost of Seymour Pass. I almost said Christmas. But I'm not talking about the paranormal type of ghost, although I could tell you some ghost stories about the downtown sometime. But what I'm talking about is small little pieces of the past that remain in the downtown area that maybe you've never really noticed before or overlooked or seen and not thought much about. I'm going to walk around and see what we can find. But this video does come with a disclaimer. The other videos that I do a ton of research to get the names and dates and such all accurate. But with this video, I'm just going to be shooting from the hip, so to speak. So I won't guarantee 100% accuracy on dates and names and that sort of thing, but I think it's going to be fun. I think I'll call this one Volume 1 because I have a feeling I'm going to do some more of these. I might as well start at my shop here. This painting on the wall by Franklin Martz is what the building looked like when I moved into this corner in 2005. The outside was covered with red marble slabs that were put on by the Jackson County Bank when they remodeled this corner in 1957. But over here I have a original photo. It was taken in 1938. And it shows what the building would have looked like pretty much when it was original. And luckily I had a landlord, or I still have a landlord, that is interested in historic preservation. And he decided to remodel the building and the one next to it and put it back as close to we could to original. I'll go outside and show you a couple of things. Now, before they did the remodel work, they checked to make sure, and this iron post in the corner here was still in place. That's from when the building was built in the 1860s. What they didn't know is when they took the floor up that this tile down in the lower part was under the floor. And they're guessing that that was probably put in around 1910 from the style of it. Then if you look up overhead, the wood paneling up in the overhead part, that's original 1860s as well. And if you look close, let's see if I can zoom in on it here. There's a pipe sticking down that's capped off. That pipe would have been for the gas light that would have hung out side here at the entrance in the 1860s or in the 1800s. Now, downtown Seymour was developed starting in the 1850s, but most of the old brick structures that you see standing today were put in starting in the 1860s, went through like the early 1900s, and the first floor commercial facades that you see have all been changed, some of them multiple times over the years. But across the street from my shop here, there's what you might remember being the Von Dillon's shoe store at one time, and if you scan up to the top of that building, I don't know if you've ever noticed up at the top, see the letter P up there at the top? There we go. That stands for the name Pathlenberger. And and I think it was John Pfaffenberger who in the 1870s, like a lot of other merchants, moved his business from downtown Rockford into downtown Seymour and reestablished it here. He actually built this building and the one next to it. This building started out, let me see if I can zoom out here. Started out as a boot and shoe store and it remained a shoe store for many years. The corner building he also built at the same time, and it was a grocery store. Now I've started heading south down North Chestnut Street, and this is actually the side of the building my shop is in, and up at the front corner there at 2nd Chestnut, you see that bracket that's sticking out from the building there. That is a part of the Interurban Railroad. The Interurban had electric powered cars that would come down 2nd Street and then make the corner here on the Chestnut and head south on Chestnut. But they were electric power, and they picked up their power from overhead wires that were strung overhead. Now out in the outside of the city, they could just put up utility poles and string the wires across, but in the downtown area they actually just strung the overhead electric wires from one side of the street to the other on the buildings, and that bracket would have held part of that overhead electric. We'll head on south down Chestnut. So I've came down a couple of stores behind me here to Leah's Boutique, and up over their door you see nice stained glass. It says Abel's, and I actually don't know a lot about Abel's. I know it was a store that existed in the early 1900s. But one thing that's kind of unique about that store is that it had this entrance here on Chestnut Street, and it actually made an L shape around the outside of my shop, and it had the next door entrance that would be one door east of me, and they had a 2nd Street entrance and a Chestnut Street entrance. And we turn around and face the other direction at the community agency building across the street. You see the name Strauss in the stonework in the building, and then you see the date 1895 at the top. Strauss was two brothers who moved here from New Jersey and opened what they called a dry goods store back in the late 1800s. And that store actually eventually became known as the gold mine store. And then one of the brothers even had a men's trouser manufacturing company that he operated in the upper floors, one of the upper floors. But the gold mine started in this building, and then later one of the employees bought the business from the Strauss brothers. His name was Kaufman, and he moved it around the corner and down a few stores from my shop, and that's where most people remember it being. And you swing around here to this alley, and on the side of this building there's some interesting things. First thing you'll notice is some old advertising. It looks like it says Havana, so I'm assuming it was for cigars. If you pan up, you see another word that I can't quite make out, but at the very top you see the word drugs. That's because this was Cox's drugstore. And interesting that Alf Cox was the pharmacist that ran the drugstore. But another interesting thing was that he was known as a local landscape painter, and of interest to me is that he actually not only painted, but he built and assembled his own picture frames to put his artwork in too, so that's kind of neat. And if you look over here, and you see these actually in other places too, But see where there was a circle? It's been bricked in there. There's another one down there. Back in the 1800s, when these buildings were built, the only lighting inside would have been gas lighting or lanterns. And so these circle windows were put into a lot of the sides of them to allow some natural lighting into the building to light them up a little bit better. They were never designed to be looked in and out of, but just for natural lighting. And this is that same building. I went across the street so you can see it better. But at the very top of this building, you see the name SCHUH, I think it was pronounced Shoe. And you hear about the founding fathers and the gentlemen who owned stores in towns, but Shoe was actually a lady, and it became affectionately known as Mother Shoe. And she ran a business, a confectionery out of this building, and eventually was able to purchase the building and have it remodeled. Raised a couple of kids, and that would have been before the Cox's drugstore was moved in. And here's another good one in the 100 block of North Chestnut. You can still see where the sign for the Peristyle sign was in this building, which was a women's and girls clothing store. When I was a child, I remember it being there. Next door you have the Knights of Pythias building, and you can see their symbol in the stained glass up there. And across the street again to this building. If you go up to the top of it, zoom in on that medallion at the top there, see a horse and rider. That's actually stands for the Pony Express. Not that this building was ever a Pony Express office, but this building was originally built to be Seymour's post office. I'm not sure the exact dates. I think it was probably 1880s. It could have been a little bit sooner than that. But this was the first building that was built to be a post office in Seymour. The post office existed in at least or rented spaces in other buildings before that. But the building wasn't as big as it is now. Let me go to the end and show you. So when the building was originally built, it was just as wide as the fancy work at the bottom there. So just that first store front, you can kind of see the seam with bricks running up and down right past that. So it was a fairly narrow building, and the rest of that was added on at a later date. So as you can see, that was just one block there, and all those different things that we saw. Find little snippets from the past. So now I'm on the back side of the block, same block, is Schweitzer's German restaurant. Most people, or a lot of people, will remember this as the home of the Chatterbox Bar for many, many years. And we pan up on this building. We've got some information. See the name Phil Me. It's kind of hard to see right now with the shadows. Date 1902. Philip Me, who went by Phil Me, was born in Seymour, I believe the 1860s. In the 1880s he ran a saloon, not at this particular location but a different location, and did that for many years. But he became a baseball player. He started out playing locally in Seymour teams and other teams around, and he became very well known as an incredible pitcher. He wasn't a bad batter either, but he was good enough that he actually was recruited by a number of pro teams, but he never did take any of them up on it. He did play locally, some of the kind of semi-pro teams in the area. He pitched for a Columbus team for a long time. He was also very involved in the local baseball world as far as starting teams and coaching teams, both adults and kids as well. But if you look kind of on the, and then he had this building built as his saloon in 1902, which is the date on there. But on either side of the 1902, see kind of some symbols there. If you look close, that actually represents a baseball bat and a ball just below the bat there. And at the top of the building, you can see a couple of home plates on either side of the top of the building. Unfortunately, Phil has a sad ending, as I believe it was in 1914 he suffered a stroke and lost control or lost use of his left side. He was making some progress over a few months' time, but then he had a setback and was distraught over the idea of not being able to be what he considered normal again, and so he took his own life at his house. Here's a Bite the Bullet gun shop at the corner of 2nd Street and Indianapolis Avenue. I don't know if you've ever noticed before, if you zoom in here into the cornerstones, there's the words 2nd Street and Indy Avenue. I'm here by the John Mellencamp mural on the side of this old guitar building here. And if you come up here, you'll see a hint of what used to stand on this park right now. There's a column left in the side of the building here. It says B. Bush, Columbus, Indiana. But that is all that remains of the Lynn Hotel that was stood on this site. It was built by Lynn Faulkner in 1881, tore down in 1991. Okay, so over there's my shop. So we're across the street now. And we've got GC Murphy Company, of course. If you've been around Seymour for very long, you remember the dime store GC Murphy's being in this building across the street. And if you come around to the back side of the building, you still see the paint on the back that says GC Murphy Company. I'm at the building that's known around Seymour as the Vestlage Building, 3-story building, at the corner of Chestnut and 3rd Street. This building was built in the 1880s by the Independent Order of Odd Fellows Seymour group, and they had their hall on the top floor, and originally the first floor was 2 commercial spaces which faced 2nd Street or Chestnut Street with a center stairway. But if you zoom in at the top up here, this is one of my favorite ghosts, if you will. You can faintly see an I there between the windows, see it? And an O. Then there would have been an O here, and then an F. Then a blank space, and then there's a H, then an A, and you can't see because of the tree, but then LL. It stood for Independent Order of Odd Fellows Hall. And while we're here, you notice the building originally ended, let me zoom back out if I can here, ended right there where that brickwork is, and then behind the building would have been some property which contained the outhouses for the tenants of the building. But on this side that faces the street, they put this see the brick column that they covered up the seam with, so it looks nice. If you go around to the back side, let me show you what it looks like back there. So on the back side here, where nobody sees it as much, they didn't care about hiding the seam, so you can very plainly see where the old building to the right ended and the new part began. Incidentally, the new addition was added on by Henry Veslich. He purchased the building, I think it was 1924, and added the new addition onto it. He's also the one that remodeled the first floor from the retail stores into the office spaces that it is like today. So just down the street, half a block from my shop, you've got the 1852 cafe and the Magic of Books bookstore combined into one store here. And again, we've got stained glass above the door. See the word Cordis in there because this was Cordis's hardware store. Cordis Brothers ran it for many years. Kind of interesting if you swing around and look at the other side of the street. The top of this building over here is the word Kessler. It's part of what became the dime store later, and that was for Kessler's hardware store. So you had competing hardware stores right across the street from each other, which was probably interesting. But Mr. Kessler, I think his name was Charles Kessler, owned the store, but he had other business things going, so he eventually sold out to the Cordis Brothers, and he went on to be president of one of the banks in town, and served at least 2 terms as Seymour's mayor back in the 1920s. So I think that'll be it for today for this video, and that was just covering basically 2 blocks around here. You see how many things we found. In the comments, why don't you tell me if you've noticed ghosts of the past through Seymour and any places. I'll see if I can help you figure out what it stood for, what it means. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, might give me a thumbs up. Post any questions or comments in my YouTube channel here. And thanks for watching. Goodbye.